بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ربنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من كرمك علما يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم طهر قلوبنا وأزل عيوبنا وتولنا بالحسنى وزينا بالتقوى واجمع لنا خيري الآخرة والأولى وارزقنا طاعتك ما أبقيتنا يا رحمن يا رحيم اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وعلمنا بالحلم وزينا بالعلم واجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين واجعلنا من المتقربين إليك على علم وهدى وبصيرة يا فتاح يا عليم وارض اللهم عن الأئمة الأعلام المهديين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد Alhamdulillah, by the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His karam and His fadl upon us, we'll continue in the text منظومة الزمزمي في أصول التفسير. In the previous lesson we looked at, or we started the section on circumstances of revelation. And we said that revelation came in different times and at different places. And what it proves is the consistency of the Qur'an despite the difference in time and the differences in place. We spoke about the Makki and the Madani, and the night and the day, and summer, winter, these different circumstances of revelation. Some were revealed while he was in travel, others while he was not on travel, some while he was active, some while he was on his bed. So we'll continue inshallah ta'ala. So when we talked about Makki and Madani, the Makki and the Madani verses and surahs, there was one question, and that was, that we addressed, not a mas'ala, and that is, how do we know the Makkiyah from the Madaniyah? So we said two ways. One, by narrations. Most of them are mutawatir, where the companions radiallahu ta'ala anhum would say that this was revealed at a certain place or at a certain time. So we know that the ayah was revealed at that place or at that time. And we also know by ijtihad, by using certain indicators, and we mentioned some of the indicators. So the same mas'ala, or the same question, will be asked concerning the other categories that we mentioned. Winter, summer, night, day. How are they known? So those are also known mostly by texts. But qara'in, indicators within the ayat themselves, no. The Makki and the Madani, the indicators are within the verses themselves. Like those that say, Ya ayyuhan nas versus Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu. Those that speak about Adam and Iblis versus those that speak about inheritance law, or like that. But night, day, travel, we know them mostly by textual evidences. But concerning the interpretation of the textual evidences, there is ijtihad involved. So a lot of the times there is a text concerning the revelation of a verse. By examining that text, we deduce that it was revealed at night or at day, but the text itself does not say it was revealed at night or during the day. And this is why we can have ikhtilaf. And sometimes the narrations differ. So one of the verses that we mentioned, and we said the majority of the ulama say that it was revealed at night, was the ayah of the changing of the qibla of salah. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ يعني فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. When the qibla changed from Baytul Maqdis to the Kaaba, majority of the ulama say it was revealed at night. and some of them say a day. This is based on the narrations that we have. So one narration said that the first salah prayed by the Prophet ﷺ to the new qibla was Salatul Fajr. Another narration said it was Salatul Asr. One narration said that the people that changed mid-prayer, once the news came to them, which were the people of Quba, they were praying Masjid Quba, this would be the tribe of Banu Amr, that they were the ones who turned during Salatul Asr. There's another narration that said that the people turned during Salatul Fajr, and some of the ulama say that that narration also concerns the people of Quba. So based on all of these narrations, that led to the difference where some of the ulama say it was at night. So if the first prayer that the Prophet ﷺ faced the new qibla in was Fajr, so Isha was to the old qibla, Fajr was to the new qibla. So the only option is that the change came during the night. So those who say it was Fajr, they would say during the night. So the ayah was a night ayah, or the revelation came at night. Those who say no, it was Salatul Asr, said, well, if the first prayer is Asr, then Dhuhr and Fajr was to the old Qibla. Therefore the change had to come between Dhuhr and Asr. So examining the verses, that's where, and then who changed? Like who, the narrations about the turning of the people once the news came, were both narrations about the same set of people or not? So all of these ijtihadi things affect the ruling. So Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani rahimahullah, the author of Fathul Bari, he said that the Prophet ﷺ changed during Salat, he changed for Salat al-Asr. The new Qibla, the first prayer the Prophet ﷺ faced the new Qibla in was Al-Asr. The narration about the people turning, he kept both narrations, the one that said Fajr, the one that said Asr, but he said these were two different people. So the one about the people turning at Quba, that was Salatul Asr, but the news reached them while they were in Salatul Asr, because they were still in Medina. Quba is in Medina. So the news, so the Prophet, the change came, and the messenger of the Prophet ﷺ started to go to give the message. So he's already on his way. The time of Asr came, the Prophet ﷺ prayed Asr with the people of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ towards the new Qibla. His messenger is still on the way. He reached Quba while they were still in Asr. So he announced to them, there's a change in Qibla, they turned. Then a messenger, either the same one or a different one, kept going outside of Medina to give the message to those who were outside of Medina. And so it took him all night to reach to Bani Haritha. So when he actually reached them, they were in Fajr. So it was a different set of people. So that way, there's no contradiction or there's no conflict between the narrations. So the one about the people changing is Quba and happened at Asr and Fajr, but for two different set of people. And the Prophet ﷺ, he faced the new Qibla for Salat al-Asr. There's still a problem with that view, in that what do we do about the narrations that the Prophet ﷺ, his first prayer that he faced the new Qibla was Salatul Fajr. The point though is, there are narrations, but the conclusion as to whether it was revealed at night or day came from ijtihad, and how we interpret those narrations. Same thing with the narration. We said that the 10 verses that concerned the event of the ifk, the rumor concerning Sayyida Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, that was revealed during the winter. But that was based on a word in the hadith that said when the revelation came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Fi yawmin shat." It was a cold day. And shat, the word shita means winter. Shat is the adjective of shita. So based on that word, they say it was winter. And Imam al-Suyuti said that's not necessary. It could simply mean a winter-like day, a cold day. It could simply also mean that the Prophet ﷺ went into a state of sweating while feeling cold because of revelation, not because the day was cold or anything like that. So again, it's just an interpretation of the word in the hadith. But majority say that it means winter because that's the first meaning that will come if somebody were to read Yawmun Shat, a day of winter. Anyway, so we'll continue from where we stopped. So we're still in in terms of the notes, the note for lesson 4. So he said the 10th section, Asbab al-Nuzul, concerning the circumstances of revelation, or the occurrences in which revelation occurred, or the situations that surrounded the different revelations. Now, yeah, because we didn't finish that bit. Yeah, lesson 4. Now, Asbab al-Nuzul is important to understanding Qur'an. The interpretation of Qur'an cannot happen without understanding the context in which the verses were revealed. Al-Imam al-Wahidi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who was one of the early muhaddith and the early mufassir ulama, he also wrote an independent work on Asbab al-Nuzul that has been translated into English and into Malay. He said that it's impossible to understand Qur'an without understanding the context in which it was revealed. Because context gives meaning. As opposed to a lot of modern theories of literature, we believe that context gives meaning. And so to actually take a verse or understand it outside of its context is an act of what we call contextomy. You're cutting it out of its context. And if you do that, then you can corrupt the meaning. While this is important, it is also important to understand that not every verse is limited to the circumstances of revelation. So while it is important to understand the context in which it's revealed, its application is not limited to the circumstances in which it was revealed. These two ends of the spectrum are very important to understand. So on the one hand, we cannot ignore the context. On the other hand, we cannot limit the application of the Qur'an to that specific context. And so we find people who are not trained in the sciences of the religion commit major tahrif, major change or misunderstanding because of one of these two mistakes, either ignoring the context or limiting the meaning to the context, especially in a fiqhi sense where it comes to the law. There's a famous principle in usul al-fiqh that says al-ibra bi umum al-lafz la bi khusus al-sabab, that the consideration, and mostly they mean the legal consideration, is with the generality of the words, not the specificity of the context in which it was revealed. So a lot of people today, for example, you'll see people doing TED Talks saying that hijab was for that very small, the instance in which it was revealed. There was a specific context, something that was happening. The Prophet ﷺ solved that problem by instituting the hijab. The verse came down in that context. Therefore, hijab is not wajib today. because that context no longer exists. That would be an improper understanding, because we say that the ruling is not limited to the circumstances of revelation. The ruling is gained from the generality of the words. قُلْ لِأَزْوَاجِكَ وَبَنَاتِكَ وَنِسَاءِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, to the believing women. So that's a general rule of usul. But it's not always the case. Because sometimes you can find that the generality of the words conflicts with something that is stronger than that generality. Like another hadith that talks about something specific, or another ayah that limits it. If it's in conflict with something stronger, then is when the meaning becomes limited to its specific context. But again, this is the role of the fuqaha, to work out all of this and then just give the conclusion. What is the hukum that we gain from that ayah? Anyway, at the end of the day, we're talking about understanding the Qur'an. So the role of asbab al-nuzul in understanding the Qur'an is important. So now he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَصَنَّفَ الْأَئِمَّةُ الْأَسْفَارَ فِيهِ فَيَمِّمْ نَحْوَهَا istifsara. That the ulama have written concerning this, and concerning asbab al-nuzul, they have written many volumes. So pursue them for further clarification. So from early, the ulama have written specifically on asbab al-nuzul. Al-Imam Ali al-Madini, rahimahullah ta'ala, is among the first ulama, the first scholars to write on asbab al-nuzul. And Ali al-Madini is one of the great, and he's one of the giants of the religion. The scholars of hadith would be more familiar with him because of his role in hadith. He's one of the main teachers of Imam al-Bukhari radiyallahu ta'ala anhum jami'a. So Ali al-Madini wrote a book on asbab al-nuzul. Al-Wahidi is one of the famous works on asbab al-nuzul. One of the more famous works of the later period would be the work of Imam As-Suyuti rahmatullah alayh, which again was translated into English and into Malay. So he said, وَصَنَّفَ الْأَئِمَّةُ الْأَسْفَارَ فِيهِ فَيَمِّمْ نَحْوَهَا اسْتِفْسَارًا. So if you really want to pursue that science and the contents of that science, then read the works that were written specifically concerning that. وَمَا فِيهِ يُرْوَى عَنْ صَحَابِيٍّ رُفِعٍ وَإِنْ بِغَيْرِ سَنَدٍ فَمُنْقَطِعٍ. Whatever of it, if you look at the notes, whatever of it here means asbab al-nuzul, is relayed from a companion, is raised, is marfu'. Marfu' is a narration where the chain goes all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ما أسند للنبي المرفوع. In the Bayquniya, you guys study the Bayquniya in hadith. Whatever is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ is a marfu' hadith. So he said, وَمَا لِتَابِعٍ فَهُوَ الْمَقْطُوعُ. But whatever goes up to the companion is considered a maqtu' hadith. It is not, it stops at the companion. It's not attributed to the Prophet ﷺ in the science of hadith. So it's, if a statement goes back to a companion, it's not correct to attribute that statement to the Prophet ﷺ. Though we can attribute the meaning probably, yani hukman, we say hukman, we can most likely say that they got that from the Prophet ﷺ. But it's not necessary, because one companion can learn something from another companion, not from the Prophet ﷺ. Also, a companion can narrate something that he he understood from the Prophet ﷺ. But in reality, it's not what the Prophet ﷺ meant to say. So because of all of these possibilities, we would not attribute a hadith that stops at a companion to the Prophet ﷺ. So for example, there's a famous statement, ما رأى المسلمون ما رآه المسلمون حسنا فهو عند الله حسنا. What the Muslims see as good is in the sight of Allah good. And by the Muslims here, it means the scholars among the Muslims. So some people even build doctrines and aqidah on that narration. But it stops at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. It's not permissible to say that this is something the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. But what he's saying here is that whatever stops, whatever of asbab al-nuzul stops at a companion is treated as marfu', as if it was attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because anything in which ijtihad is not allowed, anything that cannot be the product of speculative thought, if a companion says it, we treat it as something coming from the Prophet ﷺ. Because they're not allowed ijtihad in that matter. So they're not allowed to just make up a context for a revelation of the ayah. Because if a companion says, this ayah was revealed here and then, and it's not the case, then that's a lie. And we do not believe that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ would lie. Because they're all udul, they're all upright. By the testimony of the Prophet ﷺ and by the shahada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if a companion says, this is how, or this was the circumstance in which a verse was revealed, we treat it as hadithun marfu', as a raised hadith, yani as a hadith that goes all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, وَإِن بِغَيْرِ سَنَدٍ فَمُنْقَطِعٍ. But if there is no sanad at all, if there is no chain of narration at all, from the collector. So let's say for example Al-Wahidi, if he says this ayah was revealed for this reason, but there's no chain between him and a companion or the Prophet ﷺ, then that is disregarded. It's munqati', we disregard it completely. So he said, وَإِن بِغَيْرِ سَنَدٍ فَمُنْقَطِعٍ. If there is no sanad for the narration at all, then it is completely disregarded. It is munqati'. It is broken. These technical terms, raised, if you see it in the uplifted comma, raised, broken, these are coming from Shaykh Musa Ferber's translation of Nukhbat al-Fikr. So the justification of the terms will be on him. So I'm borrowing that from his translation. So it's broken. So it's a broken chain, but it's disregarded in terms of, do we accept it or do we not accept it? Now, there can be multiple narrations, and this often happens. There are multiple narrations concerning the circumstances of the revelation of a single ayah.
From different sources.
Huh?
From different sources.
From different companions of the Prophet. Sometimes from the same companion. So, but different chains. So you have one chain that goes and says, Ibn Abbas said this ayah was revealed for, and then he'll give a reason. And then you have another chain that goes back to Ibn Abbas, different chain that says it was revealed for, and then you'll have a different reason. So how do we deal with something like that? This fi in Arabic, you say nazala fi kada. It was revealed. We translate it as for. But the word fi can have different meanings. So the word fi can mean in. It can The meaning of it could just be location. Where is Zaid? Fil fasl. He's in the room. It can mean for the purpose of. So it communicates the meaning of what we call sabab. Fi as-sababiyya means fi that gives the meaning of the reason for something. Fi can also give the meaning of tadammun. It comprises of something. If you say in it, people translate it that way. In it there are signs. But in it, the sign is not contained in terms of place. That's not a location. If I say in this table, there is a sign for X, Y, Z. If I cut the table, I'm not going to somehow extract the lesson. That's not what fi means in that context. The place where the ayat happen is the mind of the reflector. That's why somebody can look at something and say, in that there's a sign of X, Y, Z. Another person looks at it, he doesn't see anything. So in your mind, that ayat is happening, that reflection is happening, and you're gaining from that. In the mind of the other one, that's not happening. So what it means is that this thing contains a quality. If pondered upon, lessons can be learned. So what you'll find is the meaning of fi when they're talking about asbab nuzul can differ. So you can have a narration from the same companion that says, this was revealed fi kada. And that fi can means this were the circumstances in which it was revealed. And then in another dialogue, in a different speech, speaking to somebody else, he can say it was revealed fi kada, but the fi in that statement means regarding something else. Not the circumstances, but the ayah pertains to X, Y, or Z. The topic of the ayah contains or comprises of X, Y, Z subject matters. So it can simply mean it was revealed concerning this. So when one person says a chain, this companion said it was revealed fi kada, it was revealed pertaining or concerning this subject matter. When another chain said, the same companion said it was revealed fi kada, it was revealed in this situation. This was the circumstances in which the ayah was actually revealed. So if there's multiple narrations that are equally sound concerning the circumstance of a revelation, then we look at what is being said after that. If it's clear that one is a context, one is a meaning, then that's how we understand it. Context, meaning. Though the way of expressing it is the same. Nazala fi kada. We keep both. So we say this was the circumstances concerning this subject matter. If there's a clear word that tells which is which, then we work with a clear word. Like if somebody says, sabab nuzuliha kada, the reason for its revelation was, then that's what we'll work with. So we look at each narration. If we cannot, after all of that examination, we cannot differentiate which is the actual circumstance from which is not the actual circumstance, then we go to the normal process of tarjih. The normal way, the normal methodologies of differentiating between two sound narrations that exist across the board. The muhaddithun have to deal with that. The fuqaha have to deal with that. The mufassirun, everybody has to deal with that in their own science. How do we reconcile between two conflicting narrations that are equal in terms of? Mufassirun.
Okay, fuqaha, can you just, who are these people? I mean, what do they do?
The scholars of tafsir, their main concern is understanding the Qur'an. Everything related to Qur'an, its revelation, its meaning, how to understand its meaning, what is being said in the Qur'an. That's their role, that's their function. The scholars of hadith is the same thing, but as it relates to hadith. But the main function of the scholars of hadith is only to establish what is being attributed to the Prophet ﷺ is something that can actually be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. The fuqaha, their main concern is the legal implication of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But the sources that they're all dipping from are the same sources. Just the function is different. So imagine like a ball game, baseball, cricket, football. Everybody's involved. Everybody's playing. The game is played with the same ball, on the same field, but everybody's function in the game is different. The pitcher in baseball, his relationship with the ball is not the same as the one in the field. This one has to throw it, that one has to catch it if it comes in his direction. If he throws it, is for a different purpose. Right? Not the same throwing as the one who is pitching the ball. The field, everybody runs on it for different tasks. So at the end of the day, all of them are involved in the same sport, in the same area, the same field. They're all functioning in, but in different capacities. So we have to give to each their capacity. That's your function there. That's what you're there for. So yeah, same thing with this. So everybody's dealing with Qur'an and Sunnah, but from a different perspective and for different objectives. The objective of the muhaddith is not the same as the objective of the faqih. Another way of explaining this is like there's an office. So there's one office and there's like different rooms. So in this one room there's like the fuqaha. There's their office space. The other room, the muhaddithun. So the fuqaha just, they're there, and then the muhaddithun, they look at a hadith. Then they do their work. They go through everything. Is it all the chains, is sound, who are the people transmitting this hadith? They examine all of that. So can this actually be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ? When they're done, they write up their report and then they go next door, give it to the fuqaha. They say, tell us what it means and how to apply it. That's not their job. They're done. Once that hadith come into their room, they do what they have to do with it and they pass it on. So now somebody takes it over, the secretary takes it out to the fuqaha, tell us what to do with this. They examine it. Either it's not implementable at all, or it is, but these are the conditions. These are not, they do all of that. And then they send back their report to the muhaddithun. The muhaddithun say, okay, now we're going to implement this hadith. You get the idea? Their function is not to implement. Their function is not to extract the law. Their function is not to say the applicability of the hadith to us now. Their job is simply, can this is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, can it actually be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ? Is that attribution true? That's it. So it's like that.
So the fuqaha has to understand everything.
The fuqaha, they have to understand most of the sciences of the religion. This is why the conditions, the requisite conditions for a mujtahid imam, who is the faqih with the ability to extract the law, includes knowledge of Qur'an and its sciences, knowledge of Sunnah and its sciences, and then it includes more. Knowledge of Arabic language, knowledge of ijma' wal ikhtilaf, knowledge of logic. They have several sciences. Some of the later ulama, like Ibn Salah and others, would even say one of the requisite condition of the mujtahid is that he must know mathematics, because he has to deal with fara'id. He has to calculate zakat and fara'id. All of these sciences that relate to his field, he would have to know in general. And then specific people who are going to do ijtihad in specific fields would have to now master that specific field. So let's say modern medicine. A lot of things happening that the fuqaha who are not trained in the field, they don't know the detail of the laws, and even of what happens. So somebody say, what do you do with XYZ? Before they can give a fatwa, they must understand it to the extent that they need to understand it in order to give a legal ruling. So if they don't know that, then they can't talk about it from a perspective of fiqh. Same thing with modern banking and economics and finance and all of that. So the faqih has to be somebody who's very, very, very well-rounded and very, very knowledgeable. And that's why it takes a long time. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he says it takes 40 years to produce a faqih. It takes 40 years to produce a faqih. His entire life is about study and study and study and study. So, yeah. So the 4-year Sharia degree, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Yeah. So that's how we would sort out when there are different narrations. And the methodologies of tarjih are a lot. And how do we sort out between two seemingly conflicting narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith? There are a lot of means of tarjih. Al-Hafiz Zainuddin al-Iraqi, rahimahullah ta'ala, is one of the great scholars of hadith. He produced a poem of 1,000 verses containing the science of hadith. He said that there's over 100 means. There's like 100 ways of doing tarjih between narrations. And some of the commentators said by 100, he doesn't mean exactly 100. It can even be well beyond 100. He just means it's a lot. So the muhaddith would have to know all of those methodologies to be a muhaddith proper. So then he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, أو تابعين فمرسل وصحت أشياء كمال إفكهم من قصة. Or from a successor, from a tabi'i, the generation after the companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, then it is expedient. And some matters. Expedient, as I said, I'm taking the translation from Shaykh Musa's translation of Nukhbat Fikr. So he would have to justify that translation. But a mursal hadith is a hadith in which the companion of the Prophet ﷺ is missing from the chain. This is according to majority of the ulama of hadith. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, there's a claim that Imam al-Shafi'i used mursal to mean any hadith where one member of the chain is absent. But according to majority of the muhaddithun, in the later usage of the term, mursal is a hadith where the companion specifically is absent from the chain. So you have the chain of narration from the collector all the way up, and then the tabi'i said the Prophet ﷺ said. Or the tabi'i attributes an action to the Prophet ﷺ, or an event to the Prophet ﷺ, or anything to the Prophet ﷺ. That hadith is called hadith mursal because it is suspended. The chain goes and then one link is absent, and then you have the thing that is supposed to be hanging on that chain.
It's not the same as broken.
It's a type of broken. Depends. These are issues that the muhaddithun differ on. So broken is the general class, and then there are different types of broken hadith. There are different types. For example, if 2 consecutive links are absent, or if 2 links are absent at 2 different places, or if the link is absent from the top and the muhaddithun differ what's the top and what's the bottom of the chain. But anyway, top or bottom based on whatever view. So all of these types of where there's a breakage in the link have specific names in the nomenclature of the muhaddithun. But yeah.
So you call it
Broken, yeah. It's munqati'. Yeah. So he said that أو تابعي فمرسل. If the tabi'i is absent, then it's a mursal narration. Now, mursal narration, there are differences among the ulama. Are they acceptable or not? The muhaddithun would tend to not accept mursal hadith. The reason for this is they have to attribute that, their function, their role is to establish that whatever is being attributed to the Prophet ﷺ has in fact, it occurred, or most likely, it is attributable to the Prophet ﷺ. So if they can't establish that, they're going to look at the link, but the Sahabi is missing. So in truth, they cannot say, yes, we believe this happened, or the Prophet said this or did this. So because that's their function, the muhaddithun would mostly not accept mursal hadith. The fuqaha would differ on it. Because the function of the fuqaha is not to establish that the Prophet ﷺ, that this actually happened. Their job is to establish the fiqh. So for example, if a companion is saying that the Prophet ﷺ, if a tabi'i is saying that the Prophet ﷺ did XYZ, he's not saying where he got that from, which companion told him, but we know from all of his other narrations that he narrates from the companions. It's never the case where that specific tabi'i, where we examine his hadith, it's never the case where we were never able to establish from a different chain that this actually happened. Like Sa'id ibn Musayyib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The muhaddithun say we would never find him doing irsal, a mursal chain where he's saying the Prophet that we wouldn't find from another narration that it was in fact attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. So some scholars would say if the tabi'i is of that class, then we would accept their mursal hadith.
So you say for the fuqaha,
The fuqaha would.
if the story corroborates with other hadith, then they would take that.
They would take it. Even if it's another mursal hadith. Some of them. Or a weak
But it
hadith.
has to be corroborated with a stronger hadith,
Not only stronger hadith. Sometimes the actions of the companions or the fatwa of a companion. If a mujtahid imam from among the companions give a fatwa that coincides with the meaning of a hadith that's mursal, then some of the fuqaha would accept that hadith as evidence. Because this particular chain, we can't find it going back to the Prophet ﷺ, but we can find mujtahids from the companions giving a fatwa that coincides with that meaning. So it means another companion learned the same thing from the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise the conclusion is the mujtahids from the companions made stuff up. And the fuqaha were like, well, we can't accept that. That's their job. Can we implement? Is this implementable? Is this something that can form a part of the sharia of the Prophet ﷺ? But we find a fatwa from a companion, that's shara. That's law, right? That's legal application. So that chain, we may not find somebody linking it to the Prophet ﷺ, but we can find legal application of the meaning from among the companions, the people who learned from the Prophet ﷺ. So these are all things that you have to, that not you have to, and the fuqaha worked all of these things out. But what we can gain from this is like when people say, oh, I find a muhaddith said that hadith is weak, but yet in the books of fiqh they say, just ignore that type of argument. Just salamun alaykum. Alhamdulillah, just eat. Just change the subject and man, let's grab a coffee or something. So, أو تابعين فمرسل وصحت أشياء كما لإفكهم من قصة. But many of the transmissions to the Prophet ﷺ concerning circumstances of revelation are graded as sahih. They are sahih narrations. So basically what he's saying is that some asbab al-nuzul, some circumstances of revelation are established by mutawatir hadith, some by sahih hadith, some by mursal hadith. And so each of them we take at their different level or at their different grade. According to some of the scholars of tafsir, if a mufassir from among the tabi'un narrates a mursal hadith, if the person who is narrating the mursal hadith, the tabi'i, who's dropping the companion and attributing something to the Prophet ﷺ, if that person is known to be a mufassir from among the tabi'un, then all the mursal narrations that tabi'i give is acceptable. So anything narrated by Mujahid or Ibn Jubair or Ikrimah, any of that class of tabi'un are accepted because they are the tabi'un known for tafsir. So they would have sorted out those narrations themselves. Because everybody would agree that we cannot explain Qur'an by ra'i, that we mentioned a few classes before. So they wouldn't say this was revealed concerning XYZ if they didn't have reasons to believe that it is a sound narration. And then he said, so some examples of the things that have been sahih, some examples of things that have been circumstances of revelation that were narrated through sound chains of narration, he said, ka li'ifkihim min qissa, like the hadithat al-ifk, the story concerning the rumor that spread about Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and the 10 ayat in Surah Nur that came to clear her name. Those narrations are in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The whole story from the narration of Aisha herself radiallahu ta'ala anha is in the Sahihain. So these are Sahih narrations. Or other examples, he said, وَالسَّعِي وَالْحِجَابِ مِنْ آيَاتٍ, like the verse concerning sa'i, the verse concerning the sa'i in the hajj, the going back and forth between as-Safa wal Marwa. This is a sahih narration, where when they were making the hajj with the Prophet ﷺ, a lot of the things that they used to do before Islam, they were concerned about doing it in Islam. Because people used to do pilgrimage to the Kaaba before Islam. So the companions were concerned about that, shaving the head, and so on. Among the things were the sa'i. So some of them were not sure, should we do this or should we not do this? And so they asked the Prophet ﷺ, should we do the running between Safa and Marwa? And then the Prophet ﷺ remained silent. And then he went into that state that he would go into for revelation, and then he recited the verse, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, to the end. So the hadith that spoke about that circumstance for revelation is sahih. The hadith is graded as something that is sahih. And sahih means it has been, Shaykh Nuh's translation of sahih is rigorously verified, as opposed to the normal authentic. Wal hijab, and the narration concerning the hijab, the obligation of wearing the hijab, which is Ya ayyuhan nabi qul li azwajika wa banatika wa nisa'il mu'minin, to the end of that ayah. We spoke about this ayah in the previous lesson. The circumstance of revelation was being established in sahih narration. So the women used to go out at night to relieve themselves. They didn't have bathrooms or washrooms in their homes. They had to go outside. So the women will go at night. And covering was already wajib on the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. And they were going, also a few things were happening. Yani the slave women would be attacked. Slave women would be attacked by men. Also, there was a concern, and this was mentioned by some of the ulama. It's not something widely said, but it has been mentioned, that there was a concern also that the Prophet ﷺ, his wives can be targets to get to him. They were enemies of the Muslim nation, right? They were enemies. Your family can easily become something that people target to get to you. Sort of like kidnapping today. So there's a concern about his wives specifically. The Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, were commanded to cover. But Sauda was one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. Sauda bin Zam'a was a tall woman. So Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu one night saw her, and he could recognize her. He can recognize her in the dark, in the khimar, at least the covering that they had at that time. So he called out to her saying, I know who you are. And the narrator of the Aisha narrated the hadith. She said he did that because he actually wanted more hijab to happen. He wanted the Prophet ﷺ to implement stricter hijab. This was something Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he wanted. From the beginning he wanted hijab. He himself there, Al-Imam al-Suyuti radiallahu anhu wrote a book that collected all of the things that Umar wanted to happen, and revelation confirmed what he wanted to happen. When we say confirmed, it didn't came to suit his desire, but it was in line with what he was thinking. So Umar himself said that وَافَقْتُ رَبِّي فِي ثَلَاثَةٍ. In one time he said, I agreed with my Lord in 3 matters. I thought about it, and then Allah Azza wa Jal sent down revelation to implement it. So Umar ibn Khattab wanted stricter hijab. So he shouted out to Sauda, I can recognize you, I know who you are. And then that was told to the Prophet ﷺ. And then the ayah of hijab of jilbab, to wear the jilbab, jalabibihinna, for all of them to wear the jilbab, that now became wajib. So if all of them are wearing the exact same thing, and it's a jilbab is a cloth that covers from the top, it flows from the top all the way to the bottom. That's what a jilbab, or the word jilbab at that time, that's what it meant. And according to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, it's the cloth that covers from the top all the way to without form. So not like the hijab today with the actual form, that it goes down to the neck and then comes out of it. It's like a sheet. If you were to take a sheet, if you take a sheet and put it over yourself from the head all the way it would flow, that's what they're talking about. Ibn Abbas will have one hole for one eye. So if all of them are wearing that, then you don't know who's who. You don't know a slave woman from a free woman. And you can't tell really. Tallness will still stand out, but other than that, you won't be able to tell who's who, just because no shape is revealed at all. So that way, all of the women became the same. There's no distinction. That's why the ayah said, so they're not known. فَلَا يُعْرَفْنَا. They're not known who's who. فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. And so therefore they cannot be targeted for harm. So that was narrated in a sahih hadith. So that's another example of a sahih narration. And then he says, خَلْفَ الْمَقَامِ الْأَمْرِ بِالصَّلَاةِ. And the command to perform the sunnah salah behind the maqam of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. The maqam, yani the station, which is basically the footprint of Sayyidina Ibrahim. That still is there in Makkah al-Mukarram. Then the 11th section concerning circumstances of revelation. What is the first revelation? So he said the verse of, yani iqra, read, according to what's sounder, then al-mudaththir, the first. The opposite says many. Meaning, iqra, so he says, اقرأ على الأصح فالمدثر أوله والعكس قوم يكثر. Iqra, according to majority of the ulama and according to the soundest narration, is the first revelation to the Prophet ﷺ. And Iqra mean the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Qalam. According to some, it's Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. According to others, it's Al-Fatiha. But according to what sounder, it's Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, to the ending of the first 5 verses. Then the second one to come was Surah Al-Muddathir. And then he says, وَالْعَكْسِ قَوْمٌ يَكْثُرُ. But the opposite has been said by many of the ulama. So a lot of the scholars would say that the first revelation was Al-Mudaththir, and the second was Iqra.
You mean to say that many scholars say
That Mudaththir was the first, and then Iqra is the second. So that's difference of opinion among the ulama. However, in terms of what is correct, and in other words, this difference of opinion, was it remain open, like, or can we arrive at something where we say the most correct is this, while the other position is not even something that we should see as a valid position? So according to some of the ulama, yeah, that's the case is that Iqra is the first, the other one is not a valid position, despite it being upheld by many of the ulama. And the reason for that is, when you look at why they say Al-Mudaththir, it's based on a hadith that was narrated by, it was collected on the authority of some of the muhaddithun from the narration of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, who said that the Prophet, the first thing revealed was Al-Mudaththir. Some of the ulama say, if you look at the narration, it meant the first thing revealed after there was a seizure in revelation. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ received revelation and then it stopped for a while. Right? This is what is meant by and the Quraysh were taunting him. Like, what's happening? Your God forgot you. And then Allah revealed, we have not forgotten you, nor have we forsaken you. So what came after that period of non-revelation, or the seizure of revelation? Mudaththir. So what Jabir radiallahu anhu meant by first, not first, yani mutlaqan, first after there was the seizure. Some of the ulama say, if you look at other narrations, Imam al-Bukhari's narration of the hadith of Jabir doesn't have some words that other muhaddithun, their narration, their versions have. So if you look at all of the turuq of the hadith, some of them actually say that Jabir said, and they give a long account that is not in the Bukhari, not in the version of Imam al-Bukhari, where he said that the same angel who came to me before came to me and recited Ya ayyuhal mudaththir. So if you're saying the same one that came before means you received something before. So this is not the first revelation. It's not the absolutely first revelation. So the hadith in Bukhari from Jabir is not talking about the first revelation completely or absolutely the first. It's saying the first that came after there was the seizure in revelation. So so because of that, some of the ulama say it's necessary that we say the first revelation is Iqra, and not even say, some of them say Ya ayyuhal mudaththir, because that position is not substantiated by any strong evidence. Also, even if it was strong, Shaykh Yasin al-Fadani, the Indonesian Makkah scholar, said that he used the principle of usul, الدليل إذا طرقه احتمال بطل به الاستدلال, that an evidence, if it is subject to ihtimal, where it could mean something other than what it seems to mean, in the face of other evidences that gives a different outcome, then بطل به الاستدلال, then that no longer can be used as evidence. It's a principle in usul al-fiqh. So the hadith of Jabir is of that nature. So it's necessary, he said, that we not acknowledge the other position, that Ya ayyuhal mudaththir is the first revelation. This is why there's a principle among the ulama that you cannot judge a hadith or the meaning of a hadith إلا بعد جمع الطرق, except after gathering all the chains of narrations for that one hadith. Because once you gather every single version of that hadith that exists, then you'll be able to judge the chain, and then you'll be able to understand the method, because some versions may have just one word that another one doesn't have. Sometimes just one vowel is different, and you have a completely different outcome. So what is the meaning of this hadith? So when people open Bukhari and say, oh, I found a hadith, okay, Jazakumullah khair. Because you're attempting to do something by looking at one book that people before you have the same issue. People have examined by considering 30, 40 different narrations of the same hadith that you're now finding. So when you think you've stumbled upon something, just mashallah. This type of thing, I mean, it's happening a lot. It's died down a bit, alhamdulillah. But it used to be rampant where people pick up any book of hadith and then throw away the entire tradition because I found a hadith somewhere. Say, okay, mashallah.
So the method is looking at as many sources. I mean, the established ones are 6 now?
No, that's the famous ones.
So that means
They're not the established. There's so many collections of hadith. There's so many collections of hadith beyond the 6.
I mean, I have not attempted even reading one, but I'm saying if there are 6 established ones, and is that sufficient?
Because I don't know what you mean by established. That's what I'm trying to.
As in recognize?
No, because many others are recognized. The Musnad of Imam Shafi'i is recognized. The Musnad of the collection of Ash-Shaybani from Abu Hanifa is recognized. There are many collections. Ibn Abi Shayba is recognized. Ibn Hibban is recognized. But they're not part of the 6. There are many collections that are recognized. The 6 are just the famous 6. The famous 6 compilations.
Of higher ranking? Are they because they are of higher ranking? No.
Not necessarily. But yeah, there are many collections of hadith. And then there are other juz'iyat that the muhaddith would have to know. These compilations are not on specific topics. According to As-Subki rahimahullah, a muhaddith would have to know the famous compilations, and he would have to memorize over 1,000 juz'iyat, or 10,000, something like that, of compilations on specific topics. Like compilation concerning the turban, compilation of hadith concerning sandals, compilation like that. And those exist. I mean, there's a compilation of hadith on the sandals of the Prophet ﷺ, 500 hadith in it. So stuff like that, they'll have to. And then he says, وَالْعِقْدُ الثَّانِي, we'll probably have to do that in the next session, inshallah, because that becomes very before then. So أول ما نزل اقرأ. Where did we end up? قمر يكثر وأوله. The first of it is, so then he says أوله التطفيف ثم البقرة وقيل بالعكس بدار الهجرة. So then he said that the first of it, meaning the first of the Qur'an, is at-tatfif, then al-baqarah. The opposite has also been said at the land of the migration. So this sounds strange because of he's writing a poem, but what he's saying is what we just mentioned about Iqra, that's the first of the Qur'an that was revealed completely, absolutely. The first that was revealed in Medina is Wailul lil Mutaffifin. And then Surah Al-Baqarah. Wailul lil Mutaffifin, first thing in Medina, then Surah Al-Baqarah. The opposite is also being said, where some of the ulama said the first in Medina was Al-Baqarah, then Wailun lil Mutaffifin.
Okay, first question, why does this poem use at-tafif instead of the full name of the surah, which is Mutaffifin?
No, it's also called the tatfif. Yeah, because remember we said it's not permissible to call a surah by any name except if it has been taught by the Prophet ﷺ. Any surah.
So this is, again, what is this sentence saying?
That the first thing revealed in Medina is Wailul lil Mutaffifin, followed by Al-Baqarah. Some of them say the opposite. And then the 12th section, or the 12th segment of that section, is the last thing that has been revealed. So he says the verse of the Kalala is the last. It is also said the verse of Riba and other than that. So again, difference of opinion among the ulama. So some of them say the last ayah was the ayah of the Kalala. If somebody dies, he doesn't have anybody to inherit, what happens to his wealth? So يستفتونك في الكلالة قل الله يستفتونك قل الله يفتيكم في الكلالة, which is in Surah An-Nisa. And then I think 176. Huh? Kalala. 176. Surah An-Nisa. Yeah. The one on riba is Al-Baqarah 278. So, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين. So, some of them say that's the last ayah. Some of them say the last ayah that revealed was Surah Al-Baqarah 281, which is وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Fear the day in which you will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's actually the position of majority of the ulama. No, that وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Fear the day in which you will return to Allah Azza wa Jal. 281. Baqarah 281. According to Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani rahimahullah, that is the last ayah that was revealed. That's majority of the ulama. And some of them say the last to be revealed was Surah Al-Asr. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And many of the ulama hold this position as well. It's also been narrated from Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardah. And then after that he moves to the next section, which is on the chain of transmission, or transmission of the Qur'an in general. That one gets a bit technical, inshallah. So we'll stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر جزا اللهم عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم بما هو أهله وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.